Hi guys, it's Cam here, welcome you to another episode of The Build Room. Now in this week's episode, we're not going to be working on violet crumbles. Instead, we've got a special guest car which is in a highly neglected state and needs a lot of love. So we're going to look at some of the common problems that you see on more modern cars. So stick around and check it out. Okay, so with violet crumbles still on jack stands, that means, at least for the first part of this episode, we are going to be working outdoors. And the car behind me is my girlfriend's car. It has sat outside a lot and been a little bit neglected, and it has some of the more common problems that you see on modern cars. And if you look behind me, you can see what one of those problems is straight off the bat. It's not the Alfa badge, it's the headlight. But if you give me a second to channel my best Doug DeMuro, I'll give you a proper walk around the car. This is my girlfriend's 2011 Alfa Romeo Giulietta. All right, so I'm really not sure how much neglect is going to show up on camera here, but you can see just in general, those headlights are absolutely horrid. They are milky as can be, and these Alfas really don't seem to like the Australian sun. We've got faded badges here. We've got another extremely faded quadrifoglio badge. And the other thing that sun does to these cars, which is common on a lot of cars, but really shouldn't be, is clear coat peel. So you can see the spoiler here. If we look closely along the back, you can see where the clear coat's just flaking off, and that's the red base coat underneath. Now, depending on how bad the peel is, and in particular the condition of the base coat under it, these can sometimes just be re-cleared and salvaged. This one unfortunately has gone down to the primer. You can see the grey just through here, so that's not going to work. So unfortunately, that means that at some point, this is going to have to come off the car and get repainted to match the rest of the bodywork. And apart from the badges, the clear coat and the headlights, there's a few general damaged items on this, which are the wheels are heavily curbed. This one's not too bad. And there's some interior things that I'm not going to get into today. But back onto the headlights, which are going to be the main focus today, there's a couple of things. Firstly, obviously the cloudiness is a problem, but secondly, these tend to blow globes a lot. We've tried a couple of different brands and they continue to blow, and even when they are working, they're quite dim in comparison to modern headlights. So today we're going to pull the headlights out of the car, clean up the hazing, get them protected again, and while they're out, we'll also put in some LED globes to brighten the things up. Now, in order to get the headlights out, there's some bolts in the engine bay, but there's also some bolts that you need to remove the inner fender liners to get to. So we're gonna jack the car up, pull those liners out, pull the headlights out, and then get them into the garage and work somewhere that's a little bit more friendly, where I don't have to squint so much. So yeah, there's not a lot of room in the bay to work with here. You can actually change the headlight globes without pulling the headlights, but it's hard. There's not a lot of room back here. Usually I end up moving the battery, have to move this little intake here over there. I'm not really sure if it's worth the effort. I just haven't ever wanted to pull the headlights out until now. So we'll see whether the juice is worth the squeeze on that one. And all we really need to do for this is there's a 10mm bolt here. There's a couple of Torx bolts at the top, which are T55s. We have to remove both of those basically so that we can pull the bumper cover off enough to get the headlight past it. And then around about here, there is another bolt just in here underneath the bumper cover. So we have to jack it up and go in from behind. So we'll get both sides out now and then we'll regroup in the garage.
I will stay just a few days in town, and I wonder if, do you wanna go out, wanna go now, City lights are on point, do you like, this could be a treasure, by the way you're precious, love it makes me anxious, wanna be a big love. I just say it now.
Okay, so we've got both headlights out of the car now. You can see just how badly they are hazed over, especially the driver's side one. That seems to be the worst of the two. Now, apart from just looking ugly on the car, what the hazing does is it also really scatters the light when the headlights are on. So not only are these headlights pretty poor from factory, they look really cool, sort of like they've got xenon projectors in them, but even though they look like they do, they're actually just standard H4 globes behind them. So further scattering that already poor light just makes it for an absolutely dismal output, and you can barely see where you're driving. And the reason they get like this is basically just UV damage. Now from the factory, they have a protective coating on them, but that coating breaks down over time and they yellow. And then if you try to clean them and polish them and things like that, you have to re-protect them. Now you can get kits that let you polish these and work on them when they're in the car. And certainly we could sand these and even clear coat them really in the car, but there's two issues. Firstly, I wanted to make sure that I get a really good clear coat that's not going to chip and peel up on the corners later. So I want to be able to paint all the way down the sides of this plastic. And also, we're going to put some new globes in. And as I said, I'm going to use the LED globes. Now, the problem with the LED globes, these are the Nava Sure Fits. And what the Sure Fit means is it absolutely doesn't fit anything. So these are an LED globe and they have, like all LEDs do, they have a heat sink on them so that they don't overheat. And that heat sink has a little fan in it. And it's all one integrated unit on these. So you don't have, a lot of other LED conversions will have really large LED ballasts and they're a pain in the butt to mount. So while these are easier to mount, they're still not perfect because normally when you pop these in, you have a spring-loaded metal catch that goes over them. And that's quite easy. So even when these are in the car, I've managed to get a new set of H4 globes in, swing the arm over and lock them in. With those big heat sinks on the back, that metal arm won't cross over it. It basically gets caught up, so you can't do them up. So what I'm gonna actually have to do is take those springs out of the headlights, wrap them around this first, and then pop them back in. And that's impossible to do in the car, so we're gonna do it on the bench. I'm not gonna do that just yet, because I wanna see whether or not these tidy up enough to be usable. Otherwise, they might be going back in the car as is. So we'll put these aside for now. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna sand these back, and I've got an assortment of 400 to 800 grit wet and dry for that. And then these will be ready to clear coat. And what I've got for that is a 2-pack high gloss clear. Now, this is just in a can. I didn't wanna literally break out the big guns here because it's a little bit of overkill, and I figured if you're doing this at home, you don't want to have a spray gun and a compressor and all that sort of thing. So nowadays you can get really high quality 2-pack clears in cans, which is something that in days gone by you couldn't actually get. So you could get like an acrylic clear, which is a 1-pack, so single part clear. So they put it in a can, they pressurize the can, you spray it out, and it sets in air, all right? Whereas the 2-pack actually has a hardener as a separate part. So as soon as you mix the two, they start to chemically react and they will go hard in the can. So this has, on the bottom, it has this button here. And when I crush that and then shake the can up, the two parts will mix together and it will start that chemical process. And I've really only got about, I think it's about 2 days maximum that I can leave this in the can. I don't know if I'd even want to do that, to be honest. So yeah, these are quite a bit more expensive because obviously you've got that mechanism in there to mix the paint and all that sort of thing, but thoroughly worth it because 2-pack paint is really, really durable, and they also have a really good UV protective rating. So yeah, this did cost me twice as much, actually nearly 3 times as much as a normal can of clear, but thoroughly worth it. Now that can should be enough to do both headlights and then some. So all that's left to do now is a whole bunch of sanding, which is gonna be really boring for you guys to watch. So I'm gonna do a quick time lapse and I'll just pause in a couple of areas so that you can see what these look like as they start to get to the right texture and right level of sanding to be painted properly. So let's get into it. All right, so you can see that even just wetting these down is still hazy. So when you put water over the top, it fills in all the gaps and it makes it a little bit clearer. But this is clearly gonna take, excuse the pun, clearly going to take a fair amount of work to get looking good. Okay, so that's already starting to look better. One of the things I wanted to point out though is you can see down here where it's a slightly different amount of clear. Now that still has that UV coating on it. Now what we don't want to do is have that remain under the paint, mainly because we know the paint's going to adhere to this okay. Don't really know what's in this UV coating, so better just to get rid of it so that the whole light's the same, and then we'll build up anew. All right, so hopefully this doesn't have to be explained, but this is the one we've just sanded and this is the other off the car. The main difference I want you guys to be able to see is that dry, yes, it's very, very cloudy, this one, but it is extremely smooth and it's quite a white haze. Whereas if we look at this one, I think that's showing up on camera, but you can see it's much more yellow through here. And you know, it feels dirty because it's just come off the car, but so I think that one's ready to take clear, and this one we just need to get done now, like that. Okay, they are both done. The things to look out for here are both of them about the same level of opacity and color or shade, tone, whatever you want to call it. And if you look carefully, you can't see. Remember, this one was yellow all up here, but here it wasn't too bad. So now you can't tell where that was, which means we've got it right back to the original plastic and it's all at the same, I guess, level of roughness. So what I'm going to do now is just set up a makeshift spray booth here. Okay, so we've masked up, we've got the clear ready to go. I'm just going to use the heat gun to heat these up. It is really damp and moist in here and it's really bad conditions to be painting, but I don't have any other time to do this, so I'm trying to heat these up, and then I'm going to spray them one at a time. What I'll do is I'll make sure that I'm getting the paint sticking to this headlight before I start spraying that headlight, because it's kind of like a game between getting something smooth enough for it to look good when it's finished versus having it rough enough for the paint to stick. Now you can use adhesion promoters and things like that, but on a headlight, if you sand it right and you're spraying in the right conditions, normally you don't need it, and it's just one of those extra things that can go wrong in terms of clarity and stuff like that. So these are down to 800 grit now. They're feeling really quite smooth. I've waxed and grease removed them, so now I'll heat them up and then we'll spray. And what I'm going to do is just do a little tack coat, which will be a very light dusting, and that's designed to basically eat into the plastic and provide an anchor without having enough paint to do anything weird like bubble up or crack or anything like that. So you don't have to worry too much if it doesn't look good, as long as it's dusty and even, because the next layer of clear that goes down is going to eat into that layer as well. So that's why you have flash off time, so you can have sort of 5 to 10 minutes between a coat depending on the paint system, and then if you wait an hour, then you really need to go back and resand and then re-clear. But once it's in that stage where it's tacked off but it hasn't cured properly, you can throw another coat over and it's going to eat in, and that's how those layers bond together. So when they bond together, it's going to take out the sandiness and the dustiness. So we'll heat them up and then we'll get spraying. And just remember, when you're spraying paints, make sure you're wearing a respirator, because you definitely don't want that stuff in your lungs, especially with 2-pack, because it's chemically hardened and it's going to do all sorts of nasty things. So let's get into it and see if this works.
You go and can without remorse, without heart in your head, your eye.
Alright, so that is our tack coat. Very spotty, but we're going to give that time to cure. And according to the can, our flash off time is 5 minutes. Okay, that's been 5 minutes, but considering how wet it is here, I'm just gonna do a second tack coat just to try and be as safe as possible. All right, that's another 5. Let's check it out before we paint it again. So yeah, basically it looks like it's a mildly pitted clear lens. Now obviously you can't touch it at the moment and you don't want to move around it too much because you're just going to blow dust and stuff onto it and you don't want that. But now we can try for a medium coat. And by medium coat, I'm serious there. If you just start laying on a thick coat of clear now, you are gonna run that risk of cracking, bubbling, all that sort of thing. So let's get it on and see how it lays out. Okay, so this is interesting. You can see we're starting to get some fog. So it's going a little bit foggy. That could be the paint, but I don't think so. I think it's actually probably too much moisture in the air. So we're just gonna let this settle and see how it goes. It could go either way at the moment. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, as usual, 5 minutes. All right, so the hazing is definitely coming out of that, but I'm not going to throw another coat on just yet. I'm actually going to do the other lens now so they can kind of catch up, and I just don't want to trap anything in here. So let's try this one. So this one's looking good for another coat now. All right, that is super cloudy, but I'm gonna leave it there. That's the final coat that I'm gonna put on. Just not worth trying to do that any further. So we're just gonna finish this one out. All right, so this one is still cloudy as, but I didn't expect it to clear up that quickly anyway. So we'll do a medium coat here. That will probably cloud up. Then we'll let it clear and we'll do a thick. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes now. This is about as long as I want to leave this. So I'm going to finish up with a thick coat, and then what I might do is shut down the camera, set it up here, and we can watch this and see whether it goes clear over the next hour or so. We shall see. Okay, it's the next day now and we are done with painting. So there are 3 main things that I want to go over here. Firstly is the clouding. Now I really don't think the clouding was anything to do with the clear coat. I think there's just too much moisture in the air. My garage is only semi-sealed and it's the middle of winter in WA, so there's water all over the floor. I was wet sanding parts all over the floor and things like that. There's just so much moisture in the air here, but there's nothing I can do about it. It is what it is, and so I just had to be really careful that I didn't end up sealing in multiple layers of moisture and I let that cloudiness evaporate before I laid down the next one. Because if you trap moisture in between layers of the clear and it can't get out, it's gonna A, stay cloudy, and B, can compromise the bond between layers, and then you get delamination again. And if you're ever in that situation, just make sure you're wary of the flash off and the cure times as well, because obviously you've got to let it flash off as per the instructions, but you don't want to leave it too long because it'll cure and then you're really not going to get the bite into that lower layer that you need. And again, you can compromise the paint. But it looks like we were pretty lucky. These look absolutely amazing. And the second thing, before we look at these in too much detail, is to remind you guys that I am working in a garage. It's not a sealed environment. There is a lot of trash in this clear coat. Now, the first couple of coats were pretty good, but in that mid coat and the final coat, I started to see a bit of trash. Some of it will be able to be sanded back and buffed out if I want to. To be honest, it probably doesn't really need it. They look amazing as it is. I mean, so this is what the passenger light looked like before, and this is it now. So yeah, I'm not really convinced I need to go too far with this. You can obsess over these sorts of things, but on a daily driver, it's good enough. And the third thing that I want to talk about here is the grit of the sandpaper we were using. So I actually started, these were pretty badly damaged. I started with a 400 grit, wet and dry, all over, and then I did a 600, and then I did an 800, and I left it at 800. Now you will hear lots of people online tell you should sand to 1,000, to 1,500, to 2,000, to 2,500. I've even seen people say, you need to sand to 3,000 and then you can clear over it and you're good to go. And you have to balance that level of sanding with the adhesion of the paint to it. So there's no primers or anything on these. So you have to have a surface that this new paint can key into and stick. Otherwise it's just gonna flake up over time and look horrible again. So it's a balancing act. And for me, the telltale sign of whether I've sanded enough or not enough is, can I see the sanding marks when the job's done? And if we look at these up close now, you can see there's absolutely no sanding lines. There is some trash in the paint, sure, but zero sanding marks whatsoever, which means 800 is enough. It's a different story if you're going to not paint these and you're just gonna polish them, sure, then you're going up to 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, some people even 5,000 them, so that when they polish them, there's less work to do to polish them. The problem with just polishing them is you don't get that UV protection. So you polish them up, they'll look $1,000,000, and 6 months later, you'll be doing it again. So I'm hoping that we've got years of protection here, not months. Next thing that we've got to do is get the globes in. So, as I said, these are Narva Sure Fit, which is sure don't fit really that easily, but you'll probably get them there in the end. They're a H7 globe, they're LED. I'm hoping that the LEDs will be less susceptible to blowing. I don't know whether it's heat or Italian electrics, who knows. We've gone through about 3 or 4 sets of globes on this car and it's really getting to be a pain. Now I actually snuck ahead and pulled out one of the old globes just so you can see it, and in the comparison, so this is the standard H7 globe. It's a Narva, and this is the new Narva LED. Now you can see on this, it's got a heat sink at the back, and that heat sink actually has a fan in it, and it's just got 2 prongs there that will plug in to the same prongs on the back of the H7 globe. Now the problem that you run into trying to fit these is that this area on the back of the ballast gets in the way of a little plastic clip that's supposed to just clip over the back of this and hold it down, so you can't swing it around. So let's pull open a headlight and I can show you what I mean and show you how I'm gonna get this one to fit. All right, so this is the headlight from the back. We've got a few things here. This is where the loom plugs in. This is an adjustment knob, I think, for the low beams, but basically twist that and it changes the angle of the reflectors. And then you have the high beam port here, which is just covered with a rubber flap. And this is the standard beam or the low dipped beam. So we'll zoom in and I will try to get you the best footage. This is not going to be easy to film. We'll pull this cap off, and inside there you can see the wiring plug here, which we can remove. Just pull it straight back. Give it a little wiggle as you do it, because sometimes these are a little bit tight and corroded. All right, and then we'll tuck that out of the way as best we can. And then we've got the exposed back of the globe. As I said, these are H7s. And if you're just gonna put standard globes back in here, it's gonna be pretty easy. The one thing you have to remember to do is don't touch the glass of the globe. So halogen globes run at really high temperatures, and the oils in your skin on the glass will actually heat up and they'll cause the globe to fail. So you can see here, this metal wire thing here is actually the retaining clip. So to get it out on the Alfas, push it towards the globe, towards the front of the car, and then down in the housing, and it will unhook from these little clips here. So I'll try and get a better angle for that one. So you can see there, we're gonna push it in and down. I have to put my fat hand in here, but whatever. Okay, and then let it out, Now the globe will just pull straight out. Voila. So the problem we're going to have here is that this spring here and the gap that's in it is not big enough for the head of this lamp to go through. So what we're going to have to do is pop it out. We can do that by squeezing the other ends of it. And we're going to place it over the light. And then what we've got to do is get these ends in first. So they'll have to be, basically, if you drop the bottom one in, and then you can try and push down and flick the top in. And once they're in place, then it's easy just to clamp that section over as you would have normally. So I'm not going to be able to show you that because with my hands in here, you're not going to see a thing, but it can be done and I'll show you it once it's complete. All right, so that's in. We just make sure we put on this cover so they don't get moisture in there. And this headlight is ready to go back on the car. Okay, so I'm not going to show you how to put the lights back in. It's the reverse order of what we took them out as. The only two things that I would suggest is tape up the edges of your lights and tape up the edges of your fenders and things like that, just so that you don't bang these into it and chip any of your paint. And then also, before you go and bolt them all in, get the looms on the back of them and then turn the car on, just so you can make sure that you've got the polarity right or that you haven't done anything else wrong and they're going to work, because there's nothing worse than bolting these all back together, turning on the car, and you get bupkis. So yeah, I'll get these back in the car now and then we'll have a look at the finished product. All right, so how good do those new headlights look? I'm gonna step out onto the other side so my shadow's not in the way. But yeah, that completely changes the look of the front of the car. Looks amazing. Now, if we look really close, there's a couple of little bits of trash in that clear coat, but this is something that we can fairly easily just sand out with a bit of 2,500 grit and then give it a quick polish, and there's plenty of material on top of this to accept that polishing. So yeah, I'm calling that a huge win. It's going to be much better, and what I'll do is I'll come back out here at night time and we'll show you what they look like with the LED globes. And so not only do we have headlights that look brand new, they've also got new LED globes that hopefully aren't going to blow again. And as an added bonus, they look much more modern when you turn them on, and they also throw much better light across the road. And that's obviously helped by the fact that we don't have those hazy lenses scattering the beams everywhere as well. So the only question remaining is, what else have we got in store for Alf? Now, in the start of the episode, if you were paying attention when I was sitting in front of the bumper of the car, not only could you see that the headlight was scungy, but also the paint on the driver's side corner was a little bit milky. It wasn't quite the real Alfa red that it's supposed to be. Now that's because before we got the car, obviously there has been some accident damage, a scrape or something in a car park, and that bumper's been repainted, and the bottom line is the base coat, the color underneath the clear, just isn't a good match. I've tried polishing and everything, but with a clear coat on top, it's just not something you can repair without repainting. So that's what we're gonna do. And while we're at it, we might as well repaint that rear wing as well so we can get rid of that flaking clear that was looking really ugly. And that'll be one episode, and then we'll probably do a couple more on some of the common areas that have failed on that car and are fairly common to failures on Giuliettas in general, that we need to fix so that car can once again be enjoyable to drive. But all of that is gonna have to wait, because in next week's episode, we're back working on Violet Crumbles, our 1976 Toyota Celica. So if you're new to the series, I'd recommend you go back and watch the entire Violet Crumbles series, which I'll link to here. And if you're interested in seeing some episodes on my A90 Supra, I'll link to that as well. Other than that, I just want to say like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on The Build Room. Bye for now.